My mother's voice was loud enough that the cashier stopped scanning. "She's not even our real daughter," she said, like she was clearing up a misunderstanding, like I was a mistake someone forgot to correct. I stood there holding the plastic divider bar in my hand, frozen between the candy rack and the card reader, watching the receipt printer spit out paper. The screen still showed the payment method. My debit card, my bank, my name. And my father leaned closer, eyes narrowed, and said, "Then stop acting like you own us." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just looked at the total $486.63 and thought one quiet question that landed like a weight in my chest. If I'm not your real daughter, why have you been living on my money? Then my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. One email subject line lit up my lock screen. Final notice, utility disconnect in 48 hours. The account wasn't even mine, but the name on it was. That's when I realized I wasn't about to lose my family. I was about to take my life back. That's when I realized. My name is Isha. I'm 31 and I work in medical billing. I'm the person people think is good with paperwork. I can spot a duplicate charge faster than most people can find their own policy number. I know what a late fee turns into after 3 months. I know how quickly just this once becomes a habit. I grew up in a small house on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, linoleum floors that peeled near the back door. My parents liked to tell people we were close. They used that word like it was proof of love. But closeness in our house didn't mean warmth. It meant access. Access to my time, my patience, my paycheck. What I wanted wasn't big. I wanted to belong without earning it. I wanted my parents to treat me like a daughter, not like a resource. I wanted to stop feeling like my place in the family could be renegotiated based on my usefulness. And for a long time, I convinced myself that if I just kept things smooth, paid what needed to be paid, handled what needed to be handled, eventually the relationship would settle into something normal. But my parents didn't want normal. They wanted convenient. And the way they hurt me wasn't one dramatic moment. It was a pattern, quiet enough to doubt, steady enough to drain me. The first time I realized money had become my role in the family was in 2022, when my father called me one evening and said their phone service was about to be shut off. He didn't say it with embarrassment. He said it like he was asking me to pick up milk. "Aisha," he told me, "we just need you to put it on your plan for a couple months. The new online portal is confusing. We'll switch it back." I remember sitting in my car outside my apartment with the engine off, the air conditioner humming, listening to him explain how stressful it was to deal with all that login stuff. Like the problem wasn't that they didn't pay. The problem was that the website expected them to. So I added them, 3 lines, autopay. The bill came out to $212.47 a month. 2 months passed, then 4, then 8. Every time I brought it up gently, because I always did things gently, my mother would get offended. "Why are you obsessed with money?" she'd snap. "Other daughters help their parents. You should be grateful you get to." Get to. As if paying their bills was a privilege. I'd stare at my statement and ask myself, quietly, if this is normal, why does it feel like I'm being trained not to speak? And the worst part was how easy it became for them. They'd call and say, "The phone bill is due," even though it was already set to autopay from my account. It was like they liked reminding me who carried it. Sometimes my mom would say, "You're so responsible," and it would sound like praise, until I noticed she only said it right before she asked for something else. The second incident came early 2023, a cold morning. 7:12 a.m. my mom called crying so hard I could barely understand her. "We're behind," she said. "They're threatening foreclosure." That word hit me like a hand around my throat. Foreclosure isn't a small problem. It's not, "We'll catch up next month." It's the end of a life people built, the kind of thing neighbors whisper about. I asked one question, "How much?" She said, 2 months and fees. Then she emailed me the breakdown. I can still see the numbers in my mind. $3,840.19. I wanted to ask how it happened, but I already knew the answer. The answer was always the same. They didn't track. They didn't plan. They waited until consequences screamed, then they reached for me. I transferred the money, same day. I watched my savings dip low enough to make my stomach tighten. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling that if something happened to me, if I had an emergency, I'd have nothing because I'd poured my safety net into theirs. 3 weeks later, my mother sent a photo in the family group chat. A brand new reclining sofa, the kind with cup holders and a matching love seat. Caption, "We deserved something nice." I stared at it for so long my phone dimmed. My mind did a slow, careful calculation. They had money for furniture, but not for their mortgage. Which meant the mortgage payment I made didn't save them from bad luck. It saved them from their choices. And I asked myself, if they had money for that, why did they need mine? But I still didn't stop, because stopping felt like cruelty. Stopping felt like being the kind of person they accused me of being whenever I hesitated, selfish, cold, ungrateful. Then came the third incident, the one that should have ended it sooner. Later that year, my dad had an outpatient procedure, not life-threatening, but expensive. He told me insurance messed up and the hospital was being aggressive. He forwarded me an email with bold red letters at the top. Past due, $1,126. I paid it. I didn't even complain. I told myself I was preventing stress for him. I told myself family helps. 2 days later, I was in my apartment folding laundry when my phone rang. I picked up, and I could hear my parents in the background on speakerphone with my aunt. They didn't know I was listening. My mother laughed and said, "Thank God Aisha handles that stuff. She's good for something." Good for something. Not we're proud of her, not she takes care of us. Just good for something, like I was an appliance. I stood there holding a dish towel and felt my face go hot, then cold. And I realized the truth wasn't that my parents didn't know how to manage money. The truth was they didn't have to. Because I existed. So by the time that Saturday came, grocery store, errands, regular life pretending to be normal, I was already tired. I just didn't know how close I was to the end of my patience. My mom texted me that morning, "Meet us at Marketway. We're short this week. Just this one time." Just this one time is the most expensive sentence in my family. I told myself I'd do it, then I'd set boundaries. I even rehearsed what I'd say. Calm, adult, reasonable. We filled 2 carts. Meat, bottled water, name-brand snacks, cases of soda. My mom tossed in expensive vitamins like they were required. My dad grabbed steaks without checking the price tag. At checkout, the total came to $486.63. I paid. The card reader beeped, approved. As the cashier bagged everything, my mom smiled at me in front of everyone and said, "See, this is why we keep you around." Keep you around. I looked at her. What does that mean? My dad sighed like I was ruining the day. Don't start. And then my mom's face shifted, like she decided she was done pretending. "She's not even our real daughter," she said, loud enough that the cashier paused. The air in my lungs turned heavy. I felt my heart slow, not speed up, like my body was conserving energy for something important. I said quietly, "What did you just say?" She shrugged. "You heard me." My dad added, "We took you in, you should be grateful." It would have been easier if I'd known my whole life I was adopted. It would have been easier if they'd told me with love, with care, with truth. But this wasn't truth. This was a weapon. It wasn't about identity. It was about control. Because if I wasn't real, then they didn't have to feel guilty. They could take and tell themselves they were still the good guys. I said, still calm, "So you're telling strangers I'm not your real daughter while I'm paying for your groceries." My mom's eyes narrowed. "Don't act like a martyr." My dad muttered, "Always making everything about you." And that's when my phone buzzed in my pocket, like the universe tapping me on the shoulder. Final notice. Utility disconnect in 48 hours. I opened it with my thumb, standing there in the parking lot while my parents loaded bags into their trunk like nothing happened. The email was from the electric company, bright warning colors, a countdown tone in words. I scrolled. Account holder, Yisha Ahmed. My name. My mouth went dry. I walked around the side of their car, away from the shopping carts, away from the casual way they moved through the world, and I asked my mother quietly, "Why am I the account holder for your electricity?" She didn't even blink, because it was easier. I stared at her. Easier for who? She rolled her eyes. "For us, the deposit was cheaper with your credit. Don't make this a big deal." Deposit. With my credit. The betrayal wasn't that they needed help. The betrayal was that they used my identity like a tool, then humiliated me like I was the problem. I asked, "How long has it been in my name?" My dad snapped, "Stop interrogating us." My mom said, "You're being dramatic." And in that moment, I didn't feel dramatic. I felt clear. Because the truth was obvious. If something went wrong, it wouldn't fall on them. It would fall on me. I drove home with my hands steady on the steering wheel and a strange quiet in my chest. Not numbness, not calm. Decision. At home, I didn't sit on the couch. I didn't take my shoes off. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table like I was clocking in for work. I pulled up every account I'd ever touched for them. My phone plan dashboard, bank transfers, email confirmations, utility portals. And I started collecting proof the same way I collect proof when an insurance company denies a claim they shouldn't have denied. I clicked into the electric account first. It wasn't just that I was listed as a contact. I was the primary account holder, which meant if they didn't pay, it wasn't their late fee. It was mine. I checked billing history, late fees, missed payments, payment reversals, a pattern that looked familiar because it was the same pattern they'd always had, only now it was wearing my name. Then I saw an account message log entry. Customer requested paperless statements be redirected to new email. New email. My chest tightened. I clicked the email. It was my mother's address. So she didn't forget the portal. She did get confused. She took control of an account in my name and redirected the evidence to herself. I took screenshots, time stamps, account numbers, every detail. That was the first reveal, the one that proved intention, not accident. Then I decided to do something I'd avoided, because I was scared of what I might find. I checked my credit report. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself it would just be my student loan, my car payment, my credit card. Normal. It was. There was a retail credit account I didn't recognize, opened last year. There was a utility inquiry in a nearby town. And another utility account. My stomach dropped so hard, I had to put my hand flat on the table to steady myself. I clicked into the details. Addresses I didn't live at. One of them was tied to a property my parents used to talk about, an old rental they'd claimed they'd let go of. Another was an address I'd never even heard of. I sat there staring at my own name on accounts I didn't open, feeling a kind of betrayal that doesn't burn hot. It burns cold. I called the utility company. I gave them my details. The representative's voice was polite, routine. "Yes," he said, "I see multiple accounts associated with your identity." I asked, "How many?" He paused. "Ma'am, I'm seeing 3. 3. I asked when they were opened. He read dates out loud. 14 months ago, 10 months ago, 6 months ago. This wasn't a one-time favor that got messy. This was a system. They had been building a life on my identity for over a year. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence long enough to hear the hum of my refrigerator. Then I did what my parents never expected. I called an attorney. Not to threaten, not to perform, to understand. The attorney listened quietly while I explained everything. Then she said, If accounts were opened under your identity without consent, that's identity fraud. If you keep paying without documenting, it can look like you accepted responsibility. Accepted responsibility. That phrase made my skin prickle. Like all the payments I'd made in the name of peace were being stored somewhere as proof that I agreed to be used. She told me what to gather: screenshots, statements, email redirects, call logs. She told me to send a formal notice, written, calm, direct. And she said, if they refuse to fix it, you can dispute the accounts with the credit bureaus and file a police report. A police report. The thought made my stomach twist, because filing a report means saying out loud what you've been trying not to believe. That your own parents would risk ruining you. But the alternative was worse, staying quiet and letting it continue. So I wrote the formal notice. No insults, no begging, no emotional paragraphs. Just facts. I did not authorize any utilities, credit, or services to be opened under my name at any address other than my own. Effective immediately, you must remove my identity from all accounts and provide written confirmation of closure or transfer within 72 hours. Failure to do so will result in disputes filed with credit bureaus and a police report for identity fraud. 72 hours. A time limit. I printed it, signed it, sent it certified mail so no one could pretend it didn't arrive. Then I waited. And while I waited, I kept replaying my mother's words at checkout. She's not even our real daughter. If she wanted to erase me, fine. But she couldn't erase documents. She couldn't erase timestamps. She couldn't erase my name on bills. The next morning my dad called, angry right away, like anger was supposed to reset reality. What is this letter? He demanded. Are you trying to destroy us? I kept my voice level. I'm trying to protect myself. My mom's voice cut in, sharp and offended. We did nothing wrong. You're being dramatic. I asked one question, because I already had the answer and I wanted to hear what lie she chose. Why were paperless statements redirected to your email? Silence. Then she tried. I don't know what you're talking about. I said, I have screenshots with timestamps. My dad's voice rose. So what? We were handling it. We were going to pay. I let the quiet stretch. Then I said, the company is threatening disconnect in 48 hours. They talked over each other, excuses, blame, complaint. My mom said, you owe us, we raised you. My dad said, families help each other. I listened until they ran out of breath, and then I said the sentence that finally separated truth from manipulation. If I'm not your real daughter, then you don't get to use my real identity. My mom gasped like I'd slapped her. And then she did what guilty people do when they feel trapped. She reached for the oldest weapon. We took you in, she snapped. You should be grateful we gave you a life. My voice didn't shake. I'm grateful for what was real, but fraud isn't parenting. I told them the consequence like I was reading policy. You have 72 hours. After that, I file disputes and I file a report. My dad tried one last time to control me with certainty. You won't do it, he said. You don't have the stomach. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I said, watch me. And I ended the call. 2 days later, I received an email from the electric company. Account transfer request submitted. The next day, account closed. My phone provider sent confirmation. The lines were being moved off my plan. Suddenly, everything that was too confusing was getting handled quickly. Because now it wasn't about convenience. It was about consequences. My parents didn't collapse in tears. They collapsed in paperwork. They started texting in a different tone, sweet, careful, like they were trying to put the mask back on. My mom wrote, we didn't mean it like that. You know how your father talks when he's stressed. My dad wrote, let's not involve outsiders. We can fix this as a family. As a family. That phrase would have worked on me before. But now I knew what it meant. It meant, keep it quiet so we can keep our image. So I replied once, and only once. I'm not discussing this verbally. Everything will be documented. Confirm in writing that all accounts under my identity are closed or transferred. They didn't like that. People who thrive on emotional pressure hate documentation. Documentation doesn't bend. Documentation doesn't feel guilty. Documentation doesn't get tired. The third day, my mom called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that started soft and ended sharp. "You're being cruel," she said, "after everything we did for you." Cruel. I listened to the voicemail twice, and on the second time, I heard what I'd missed before. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "We were wrong." She said, "After everything we did." Like love was a debt. Like my existence had an invoice attached. And I realized something else, something that made my stomach settle into calm. It didn't matter whether I was adopted or biological, because the way they treated me had nothing to do with blood. It had to do with entitlement. They wanted the benefits of having a daughter, help, support, money, stability, without the responsibility of treating me like one. And that's why the insult came out at checkout, because in their mind, calling me not real made their taking feel justified. Except it didn't. It just exposed them. Over the next week, I froze my credit. I set up alerts. I changed passwords. I updated security questions with answers my parents couldn't guess. I removed my parents from anything tied to my life. Emergency contact forms, beneficiaries, authorized users. Not as punishment. As protection. Then came the part I didn't expect. Extended family started calling. Not everyone, just the people who had noticed my parents' story changing. My aunt asked carefully, "Are you okay?" My cousin said, "Your mom's been saying you're attacking them over bills. That doesn't sound like you." I didn't overshare. I didn't rant. I said calmly, "My identity was used without permission. I fixed it. That's all." And funny enough, I didn't have to convince anyone. Because people know. They know who always pays, who always shows up, who always keeps the peace. They just don't say it until there's a crack big enough for truth to slip through. My parents tried to spin it anyway. They always would. They told people I was ungrateful. They said I was too sensitive. They implied I was confused. But it's hard to paint someone as confused when the receipts show they paid your mortgage, your phone, your utilities, your late fees, and then got called not real in public. The hardest part wasn't cutting them off financially. The hardest part was accepting that the version of them I kept hopping for didn't exist. I had built an entire relationship out of potential, out of maybe next time, out of they didn't mean it. But the evidence didn't care what I wanted to believe. Evidence only cares what happened. And what happened was this. They used my name to keep their lights on. They used my credit to avoid deposits. They redirected statements so I wouldn't see the damage. And when I hesitated, they reminded me I wasn't real. So I made one boundary, and I held it like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. If someone needs me to feel small in order to take from me, they don't get access to my life. I didn't throw a party when the accounts were closed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet, like a room after a storm passes when you can finally hear your own breathing. For the first time in years, I paid my own bills and only my own bills. For the first time, my paycheck stayed in my account long enough for me to plan my future instead of patching theirs. And the strangest thing happened. Without the money, my parents' voices got smaller. The calls got fewer. The urgency disappeared. As if the relationship itself had been powered by my payments. That's when I realized the most painful truth of all. They didn't miss me when I stopped funding them. They missed what I provided. And now, when I think back to that grocery store, my mother's voice, the cashier pausing, my father's cold look, I don't feel the same humiliation. I feel clarity. Because that day gave me something I couldn't have gotten any other way. It gave me permission to stop proving I belonged. They said I wasn't their real daughter, until they learned I was the real reason their bills got paid. And the moment I stopped funding their disrespect was the moment I finally heard my own worth.